I never thought I would be the kind of woman who would end up confessing her story to strangers, but here I am, pouring my life out like pages ripped from a diary. Maybe it's because I've carried these memories inside me for so long, they feel like they're eating me alive. Or maybe it's because I finally reached the point where the shame doesn't outweigh the need for release. My name isn't important. What matters is that once upon a time, I thought I had everything. A loving husband. A stable home. A future I could picture down to the smallest detail. For years, I believed that I was one of the lucky ones, blessed with a man who adored me, with whom I built a life, brick by brick. His name was Daniel. I met him in college when I was 21. He wasn't the kind of man you immediately noticed in a crowd, he wasn't tall or flashy or particularly loud, but he had this quiet confidence, this ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room when he looked at you. I remember the way he listened. Not the kind of distracted nodding that most people did, but real, focused attention, like every word I spoke mattered. It sounds so small, but it was intoxicating. I was studying literature, he was in business administration. Two very different worlds, yet somehow our paths crossed when a mutual friend invited us both to a coffeehouse poetry night. I stood up and read a piece I'd written about loneliness, about how you could be surrounded by people and still feel like you were suffocating in silence. I remember feeling so exposed, trembling as I sat back down, when suddenly he leaned toward me and whispered, "You just described exactly how I feel most days." That was the beginning. We dated for 3 years before getting married. He proposed in the middle of a rainstorm, outside my tiny apartment, with no ring in hand, just his soaked voice trembling with words, "I don't want to wait anymore. Please, marry me." I laughed, I cried, and I said yes. We married the following summer in a small ceremony with our families. For a while, everything was perfect. I won't bore you with the early married years. They were happy. Sweet, even. We built routines, shared inside jokes, celebrated birthdays with cheap wine and home-cooked dinners. We dreamed of children, though I secretly worried it might not happen because of some health issues I had. Still, Daniel never made me feel less than. He would kiss my forehead and say, "It's just us, and that's enough." And I believed him. But life has a way of testing even the strongest promises. It started so quietly that I didn't notice at first. He began working later. He said the firm was giving him more responsibility, and I was proud of him, proud that his hard work was being recognized. I told him not to worry about me, that I understood, and I'd have dinner waiting no matter how late he came home. Sometimes he wouldn't show up until midnight. Sometimes, not at all, claiming business trips that popped up unexpectedly. At first, I defended him to everyone. Friends who whispered, "Doesn't it bother you?" Family who gently suggested he might be pushing himself too hard. I told them Daniel was ambitious, dedicated, and that his sacrifices were for us, for the life we dreamed of. I clung to that narrative like it was gospel because the alternative, the idea that he might not be where he said he was unthinkable. Then came the first crack. I remember the night vividly. I had fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him. Around 2 a.m., I heard the front door open. I blinked groggily as he stepped inside, hair messy, shirt untucked, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. It wasn't obvious, just a hint, like a whisper, but it was enough to lodge itself in my chest. He froze when he saw me awake, then quickly smiled, kissed my forehead, and mumbled something about a long night at the office. I wanted to believe him so badly that I forced myself to smile back. But that night, when he turned over in bed, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, my gut twisting in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. That was the beginning of my unraveling. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. One perfume scent didn't mean anything. Offices were full of women, after all. Maybe he had brushed past someone, maybe someone had hugged him goodbye, maybe I was just imagining it. That's what I repeated in my head the next morning as I folded his shirts and poured his coffee. He kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for breakfast, and left like always. But my body knew what my mind was refusing to admit. Something had shifted. The following weeks were a blur of doubt. I started noticing the way his phone was never left unattended anymore. How he'd take it with him into the bathroom, keep it on silent face down on the table. He used to be careless about it, he'd leave it on the counter, sometimes I'd even answer his calls if he was busy. But now it felt like a secret he had to guard. One Saturday afternoon, while he was supposedly at the office, I drove by on a whim. It was ridiculous, I know. I felt like some paranoid housewife, but I had to prove myself wrong. I wanted to see his car in the lot, to shame myself into silence for doubting him. But when I pulled up, the parking lot was nearly empty. His car wasn't there. My stomach sank, but I told myself maybe he'd taken a client to lunch. Maybe he was at a different branch. The excuses came easily because they were the only things keeping me sane. Later that evening, when he came home carrying takeout bags and smiling like nothing was wrong, I hugged him tightly, inhaling his scent, desperate to find traces of something I could hold against him. Instead, I found myself crying into his shoulder, telling him how much I missed him. He held me, rubbed my back, and whispered, "I know, baby. It's just a busy season. Things will calm down." But they didn't. Things got worse. I started keeping a journal during that time. Not of my feelings, I couldn't bear to see them in ink, but of facts. What time he left. What time he came home. Excuses he gave. Trips he mentioned. I thought if I documented everything, I could find a pattern, something rational to cling to. But all I found were inconsistencies. The night it all came crashing down is one I'll never forget. He had told me he'd be working late again. By midnight, I was pacing the living room, anxiety clawing at my chest. Something inside me broke, and I dialed his number. He didn't answer. I tried again, and again, until finally, on the fifth attempt, a woman's voice answered. She sounded startled. Hello." I froze, heart slamming against my ribs. "Who is this?" Silence. Then the click of a call ending. I stood there, staring at the phone like it had betrayed me, shaking so violently I had to sit down. Minutes later, Daniel walked in through the door, his shirt wrinkled, hair tousled, looking almost exactly as he had that first suspicious night. I confronted him then. My voice was trembling, but I forced the words out. "Who was she?" "The woman who answered your phone." For a moment, his mask cracked. Just a flicker of panic in his eyes before he sighed and sat down across from me. He buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And with those two words, my world shattered. "I'm sorry." The words echoed through me, hollow and cruel. I felt my whole body go cold, as if my blood had turned to ice. "For what exactly?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Sorry for working late. Sorry for lying to me. Sorry for letting some other woman answer your phone." Daniel lifted his head, his eyes glassy. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed, bitter and broken. "You never wanted to hurt me, but you did it anyway." "Who is she?" He hesitated, then whispered, "Her name's Claire. She's from work." My chest tightened. I could hardly breathe. "How long?" He looked away, his silence enough of an answer. I pressed again, my voice cracking. "How long, Daniel?" 6 months, he muttered. 6 months. Half a year. Half a year of dinners, lunches, kisses, bedtime stories with our daughter, all while he was betraying me. My hands shook as I grabbed the nearest cushion, pressing it against myself like a shield. "Do you love her?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He winced. "It's not like that. It was a distraction. She made me feel." He stopped, as if realizing he was about to make things worse. She made you feel what? I snapped. Alive? Excited? Desired? What about me, Daniel? What about the woman who cooks your meals, who knows the sound of your breathing in her sleep, who gave you a family? Was I not enough? Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. He reached for me across the table, but I pulled back. Don't, I hissed. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. Maybe he was scared of losing me. Or maybe just scared of the consequences of being caught. I stood up, pacing the room, unable to contain the storm inside me. 6 months. Do you know how many lies that is? How many times you kissed me goodnight after being with her? How many times you made me feel crazy for doubting you? Please, he whispered. It's over. I ended it. That's why she answered, I was telling her it's done. I want to fix this, with you. I stopped pacing, staring at him. Part of me wanted to believe him, to cling to the hope that maybe he was telling the truth, that maybe this nightmare could be undone. But another part of me, the louder part, knew better. You don't get to decide it's over just because you're caught, I said quietly. You broke something in me, Daniel. Something I don't know if I can ever get back. For the first time since the conversation began, the tears came. They rolled hot and fast down my cheeks, and I hated myself for letting him see me this way. He stood slowly, like approaching a wild animal. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just, don't give up on us. Please. I looked at him, the man I had loved for years, the father of my child, the person I thought would be my forever. And I felt nothing but emptiness. That night, he slept on the couch. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of our home. For the first time in our marriage, I felt truly alone. The morning after his confession, I moved through the house like a ghost. I made coffee, dressed our daughter, tied her little shoes, and kissed her forehead, all while my mind replayed his words on a loop. 6 months. Daniel sat at the table, eyes red from lack of sleep, watching me like he was waiting for a verdict. I couldn't meet his gaze. Every time I looked at him, I saw the shadows of her hands on his skin, her lips on his mouth, her perfume clinging to his clothes. Do you want me to take her to school? He asked softly. I'll do it, I said, sharper than intended. I didn't trust him, not with my daughter, not with anything. On the drive, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My daughter chattered in the back seat about a drawing she'd made, and I forced myself to nod, to smile, to pretend everything was normal. But inside, I was crumbling. After dropping her off, I parked the car and sat there, trembling. For the first time, I called my best friend, Elena. I hadn't planned to tell anyone, but the words spilled out in sobs. She listened quietly, then said in her firm, steady voice, "You don't deserve this. He doesn't just get to walk back in and act like nothing happened. You need to decide if his regret is real, or just fear of losing comfort." Her words stuck with me. When I returned home, Daniel was cleaning the kitchen. He never cleaned the kitchen. It was almost laughable, if it hadn't been so tragic. He looked up when I walked in. "I made an appointment with a marriage counselor," he said quickly, like a child presenting a good grade. "This Friday. We can go together." I raised an eyebrow. "You think a counselor is going to erase 6 months of lies?" "No," he admitted. "But maybe it can help us figure out if there's anything left to save." I wanted to scream, to throw plates, to demand every detail of every moment he'd shared with her. But instead, I just nodded, too drained to fight. The next few days were unbearable. He hovered constantly, desperate to show me he was present, taking out the trash without being asked, cooking dinner, even leaving his phone on the counter with the screen up as though that gesture alone could rebuild trust. But every ping of a notification made my chest tighten. I didn't look at the phone, though. I was too afraid of what I might see. At night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep beside him. I took the bed, he stayed on the couch. Some nights I heard him crying quietly, muffling the sound into a pillow. Other nights, I lay awake until dawn, my mind spinning. One evening, Elena came over with wine. After I tucked my daughter in, we sat at the kitchen table. She poured us both a glass and studied me carefully. "You look like you're disappearing," she said. "You can't let this eat you alive." I sipped the wine, my hands trembling. I don't even know who I am anymore. For years, I thought I was his partner, his safe place. Now I feel like I was just an option he settled for until something shinier came along. Elena reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You are not an option. You are the prize. If he can't see that, he doesn't deserve you." Her words broke something open in me. For the first time since discovering the affair, I cried without shame, sobbing until my chest hurt. When she left, Daniel was waiting in the hallway. He had overheard enough to know what we talked about. His eyes were filled with desperation. "I love you," he whispered. "I made a mistake, but you're my everything. Please, don't give up on us." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But the truth was, I didn't know if love was enough anymore. Friday arrived like a storm cloud I couldn't avoid. I spent the entire morning pacing, torn between wanting to cancel the appointment and needing answers. My stomach churned the whole drive to the counselor's office. Daniel sat beside me, unusually quiet, his hands gripping the steering wheel until I thought it might snap. The counselor, a woman named Marissa, greeted us with a warm smile. She had kind eyes, the kind that made me want to collapse and let someone else carry the weight for once. We sat on opposite ends of the couch in her office, the space between us like a canyon. "So," Marissa began softly, "why are you here today?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Daniel beat me to it. "Because I destroyed our marriage," he said, voice cracking. "And I don't want to lose her." The honesty startled me. For the first time, he didn't try to soften it with excuses. Marissa nodded. "That's a start. But let's go deeper. Why did you cheat?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at me, then down at his hands. "I don't know. I was lonely." He stopped, shaking his head. "No, that's not right. I felt invisible. I'd come home, and everything was about work schedules, bills, our daughter. And instead of talking to you, instead of saying I felt disconnected, I looked for someone who made me feel wanted. It was selfish. It was disgusting. And I hate myself for it." His words sliced through me. Part of me wanted to scream, "You felt invisible. What about me?" I was drowning too. But another part of me, the quieter, more exhausted part, recognized the truth. We had both been drifting. I had poured myself into being a mother, a housekeeper, a planner of our lives, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeing him as my partner. Marissa turned to me. "How does that make you feel, hearing his reasons?" My voice shook as I answered. Like I wasn't enough. Like no matter what I did, he'd always want more. And now, I feel broken. Betrayed. I don't know how to ever look at him the same way again. Silence filled the room. Daniel reached toward me, but I flinched before I could stop myself. His hand hovered in the air, then dropped back to his lap. Marissa leaned forward. "Rebuilding trust after infidelity isn't impossible, but it requires brutal honesty, patience, and time. You both need to decide, do you want to do the work? Or is the damage too deep?" The drive home was suffocating. Finally, I broke the silence. "Do you even regret her? Or do you just regret getting caught?" Daniel's eyes glistened as he stared at the road. "I regret everything. I regret meeting her, texting her, touching her. I regret every moment that wasn't with you. I regret not telling you I was falling apart. And yes, I regret getting caught, because that's the only reason I'm sitting here, facing what I did. But don't mistake that. If I could erase her from existence, I would. I didn't respond. My heart was a battlefield, anger on one side, love on the other, and exhaustion holding the middle ground. That night, I tucked our daughter into bed, kissed her soft hair, and lingered by her door longer than usual. She was the only pure thing left in the wreckage. When I walked back to the living room, Daniel was waiting. He looked small, fragile, nothing like the man who had once seemed so confident, so unshakable. "I'll sleep on the couch again," he said quietly. "But please, don't shut me out completely. Even if you don't forgive me, just let me prove I can be better." I stared at him, my throat tight. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if forgiveness would ever come. But for the first time, I saw not just the man who betrayed me, but also the man begging for redemption. And I wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. The following weeks felt like walking barefoot over broken glass. Every step forward cut me open in new ways. Some mornings I woke up determined to fight for us, to rebuild what we'd shattered. Other mornings, I looked at Daniel and felt nothing but resentment, like his very presence was a reminder of how foolish I had been to believe in forever. We kept going to counseling. Marissa had a way of holding up a mirror to us that was both terrifying and strangely liberating. She asked questions I hadn't dared to voice even in my own head. One afternoon, she turned to me and said, "What do you need, right now, to even consider staying in this marriage?" The answer tumbled out before I had time to filter it. "I need honesty. All of it. I need to know who she was, when it started, how it ended. No more half-truths. No more protecting me with silence. If he lies again, even about something small, I'm gone." Daniel's shoulders sagged, but he nodded. "Then I'll tell you everything." That night, after our daughter was asleep, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. His hands shook as he talked, voice low and trembling. He told me her name. Where they met. The places they went. How he lied to me with a straight face when I asked why he was late. How guilty he felt coming home and kissing our daughter goodnight after being with her. Every word was a dagger, but I forced myself to listen. My stomach turned, my chest ached, but at least the shadows were replaced with harsh, ugly light. When he finished, tears streaming down his face, he whispered, "That's it. There's nothing else. No secrets left." I sat there, silent, staring at him. My heart wanted to believe. My mind screamed not to. The next day, I took small steps for myself. I reconnected with parts of me I had abandoned long before his betrayal. I went back to yoga classes. I met Elena for coffee instead of always canceling. I even started painting again, something I hadn't touched since college. And with each step, I realized something. I had been living in the shadow of our marriage, dimming my own light to keep the household running, to keep everything together. But together had nearly broken me. One evening, Daniel noticed the paint on my hands and smiled faintly. "I missed that," he said. I looked at him, unsure how to respond. I missed it too. For the first time in months, the silence between us wasn't suffocating. Slowly, painfully, the distance began to shrink. He still slept on the couch, but sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself wanting to sit beside him. Sometimes, when he laughed with our daughter, I caught glimpses of the man I once loved so fiercely. One night, I asked him, "Why did you come back? Why fight for me, for us, when you could have just gone to her?" His answer was simple, but it cracked something in me. "Because she was an escape. You are my home. And I can't live without home." I didn't forgive him then. Not fully. But I felt the faintest thread of hope tie itself around my heart. It happened quietly, almost unexpectedly. One Friday night, after putting our daughter to bed, I walked into the living room and found Daniel asleep on the couch, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. The TV flickered with some muted late-night show, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching him breathe. His face looked tired, worn down, but softer somehow. Vulnerable. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the loneliness, or the weeks of seeing his effort, or just my heart betraying my head. But I reached for the blanket and gently draped it over him. As I did, he stirred, his eyes blinking open. "Hey," he whispered, his voice groggy. "Hey," I said back, softly. He sat up a little, the blanket slipping from his shoulders. "You okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Just, tired of hating you." The words slipped out before I could stop them. For a second, I wished I could take them back, but then I saw the way his eyes shimmered, his jaw tightening. "I'm tired of hating myself," he admitted. The silence stretched between us, but it wasn't cold this time. It was heavy, charged. I sat down on the edge of the couch. My body tensed at first, but when his hand tentatively brushed mine, I didn't pull away. His palm was warm, trembling. I let him hold it. And then, like muscle memory, we leaned toward each other. The kiss was hesitant, almost clumsy, like two people meeting for the first time instead of a husband and wife with years of history. But there was something real in it, something raw and aching. I pulled back first, my heart pounding. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But thank you, for letting me feel close to you again." That night, I didn't make him go back to the couch. He slept beside me, both of us lying stiffly at first, as if afraid to touch. But somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up to find his arm around me, his breath steady against my neck. And for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I slept through the night without waking up from nightmares. The days that followed weren't magically easier. I still had moments of anger, flashes of memory that cut deep. But we started to rebuild, not with grand gestures, but with small, almost invisible stitches. Cooking dinner together. Sharing coffee in the morning. Talking honestly, even when it hurt. One evening, as we folded laundry side by side, he looked at me and said, "You're stronger than I'll ever be. And I know I don't deserve this chance, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." I didn't answer right away. But when I glanced at him, I realized I no longer saw the man who betrayed me. I saw the man who was fighting for me, for us, with everything he had left. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again. The months that followed were far from perfect, but they were real. Every scar between us had to be acknowledged, every wound carefully cleaned before it could heal. We argued, sometimes bitterly, but we no longer buried our feelings under silence. When I felt insecure, I told him. When he felt ashamed, he admitted it. Our daughter, in her innocent way, became the thread weaving us back together. Watching him read her bedtime stories, hearing her giggle at his silly voices, softened the hard edges of my resentment. One night, she looked at us both and said, "You're my favorite people." I cried quietly in the kitchen afterward, because for the first time in a long time, I believed we could still be a family. Counseling became less about survival and more about growth. Marissa told us once, a marriage that survives betrayal doesn't return to what it was before. It becomes something new. And sometimes, that new thing is stronger. Daniel started writing me small notes again, little apologies, little thank yous. I'd find them tucked in my purse or taped to the bathroom mirror. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Dinner was amazing last night. I still think you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." I didn't fall back in love all at once. It happened slowly, in fragments. In the way he listened to me now, really listened. In the way he reached for my hand when we crossed the street. In the way he looked at me as if he was still afraid I might disappear. One evening, nearly a year after the night I found those messages, we went for a walk along the river. The air was cool, the sky streaked with orange and pink. He stopped, turned to me, and asked quietly, "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I looked at him, at the man who had broken me and then spent every day since trying to piece me back together. I thought about the pain, the tears, the nights of doubt. But I also thought about the laughter that had returned, the warmth in our home, the fragile but real bond we had rebuilt. "I think I already have," I said. His eyes filled with tears, and he pulled me close. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't stiffen in his arms. I let myself sink into the embrace, into the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by betrayal, but by resilience. That night, when we made love, it wasn't desperate or guilty, it was gentle, patient, full of quiet promises. And afterward, as we lay tangled together, I realized something that made me smile through my tears. We weren't who we used to be, but maybe that was the point. We had been broken, yes. But in breaking, we had also been remade. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow.